The frost on the primary observation port crystallized in fractal daggers, obscuring the view of the human inside. Absolute Zero protocols hummed through the deck plates, a vibration that promised a silent, frozen end to the trade deadlock. Council Prime Vale leaned into the thermal monitors, his magma-veined skin pulsing a defiant, frustrated orange. On the screen, the diplomat Lin Wei was not a statue of ice. He had stripped off his charcoal suit jacket, revealing a sweat-dampened shirt that defied the negative 50-degree atmosphere. The part that still keeps me up at night? That comes later. You'll want to see how a species from a garden world handles the bite of the void. Because if you think you know what tough looks like, you haven't seen a human get cold. 11 hours earlier, the atmosphere in the high chamber had been thick with the scent of sulfur and impending war. Lin Wei had adjusted his silk tie with a precision that bordered on the rhythmic, his expression unreadable as Vale demanded the mineral rights to the belt. The Morvith ruled through the simple reality of heat. To be cold was to be dead. They assumed the soft, hairless creature before them would fold at the first hint of a breeze, which meant the readings were wrong. Ignis, the warden of the deep cells, adjusted the sensor gain for the fourth time. The display stubbornly insisted that the interior of the punishment chamber was a lethal wasteland of crystalline nitrogen. But Lin Wei was moving. He wasn't huddled in a corner or weeping for mercy. Instead, a rhythmic chirp echoed through the comms. It was the digital chime of a cheap Casio watch, signaling the top of the hour. Beneath the shimmering frost of the ceiling, Lin Wei began to drop. He hit the floor with his palms, kicked his legs back into a plank, and surged upward with a grunt of focused effort. He was performing burpees, a primitive sequence of high-intensity movements designed to turn his own musculature into a biological furnace. His silk tie was gone from his neck. He had stuffed it into the primary cryogenic vent, the expensive fabric acting as a makeshift gasket to redirect the flow of liquid nitrogen. Steam, actual honest-to-God water vapor, began to rise from his shoulders as he accelerated. Warden, Vale hissed, his internal fires dimming to a low, concerned red. Why is he not shattered? The thermal kinetic energy in that room is non-existent. Ignis tapped the biological overlay. His core prime. It is staying at 37 degrees. It isn't just luck. His body is fighting back. Ignis's hands, or the cooled obsidian equivalents of them, trembled over the holographic interface as he pulled the human's evolutionary records. The data was a nightmare of biological contradictions. Humans were endothermic. They were walking, breathing chemical fires that had spent 300,000 years perfecting the art of not dying when the sun went away. High prime. The subject's internal temperature is stable at 37 degrees. Ignis reported, his voice cracking like cooling glass. He is utilizing shivering thermogenesis, which is a process where the human brain commands the skeletal muscles to vibrate at high frequencies to create friction-based heat, effectively turning his own body into a localized furnace that defies our containment physics. Vale watched the screen. Lin Wei had stopped the burpees. He was now standing directly in front of the primary camera, his breath blooming in thick, defiant clouds of silver mist that smelled faintly of the laundry detergent on his expensive shirt. He looked at his watch. Or perhaps he simply didn't care. The air in the cell was thin and sharp, yet the human reached out and tapped the glass of the observation port from the inside. Clack, clack, clack. Release him, Vale commanded. The heavy, frost-rimed doors hissed open, shedding sheets of frozen condensation that shattered against the floor like glass. Lin Wei stepped out into the searing heat of the Morvith corridor. He did not collapse. He did not beg for a heat lamp. Instead, he reached out, retrieved his charcoal jacket from the warden's desk, and began to put it on with steady, rhythmic movements. It's a bit brisk in here, isn't it? Lin Wei asked. He adjusted his cuffs. He looked at the Council Prime, whose molten core was visible through the cracks in his chest, and gave a polite, chillingly professional nod. Now, the human continued, about those mineral rights. I find that a cold room really helps clear the mind for a fair deal. Ignis watched the human walk toward the negotiation suite. The warden looked back at the cell, then at the data readout on his console. He began to type the final incident report. The Morva thermal archive was usually reserved for sun cores and volcanic samples. Now it held a single strip of blue silk. It sat behind reinforced stasis glass, labeled as a primary heat containment device of the Terran diplomatic corps. Back on Earth, Lin Wei sat in his living room, wrapped in a knitted throw. He reached for the thermostat and frowned at the digital display. The house was a perfectly regulated 22 degrees, yet he found himself wondering if the vents were blowing just a little too hard. He pulled the blanket tighter around his shoulders.